up there.
We're still working through.
And you can.
TV guy. Okay, we're ready. So welcome to the July the 13th, 2020 meeting from the Historic Zoning Commission. Echo. Please respond when I call your name. I'm gonna have to unplug this. It's got an echo. Can y'all hear me now? Okay, a roll call. Kelly Baker Heffley.
Present.
Susan Besser.
Present.
Jeff Carson.
Present.
Mike Hathaway.
Present.
Brian Laster.
Present.
Lisa Marquardt.
Present.
Mary Pierce.
Present.
Ken Scalf.
Here.
And Jim Roberts here. First order of business is to entertain a motion that we approve Resolution 2020-120, a resolution declaring that the Historic Zoning Commission shall meet on July 13th, 2020, and conduct its essential business by electronic means rather than being required to gather a quorum of the members physically present in the same location, because it is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Is there such a motion?
So moved. This is Kelly.
Kelly, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Ken? Thank you. Please then respond with a vote after I call your name. Kelly Baker Heffley,
Aye.
Susan Besser. You're muted, Susan.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Carson,
Aye.
Mike Hathaway,
Aye.
Brian Lasser,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Ken Scalf,
Aye.
and Jim Roberts. To prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the city of Franklin, officials, staff, and citizens, the Historic Zoning Commission will restrict physical access in the meeting room to a small number of staff members due to the current limitations on public gatherings. Accommodations have been made to ensure the public is able to participate in the meeting. The public may participate in the following ways: watch the meeting on Franklin TV, watch the live stream through the City of Franklin Facebook and YouTube accounts, call 615-550-8434 to listen to the meeting. Callers will be unmuted and given an opportunity to ask questions during the meeting at specific times. Limited viewing will be available in the lobby of City Hall to watch the live video. The public may email questions to planningintake@franklintn.gov to be read aloud during the meeting. Comments will be accepted up to 1 hour prior to the meeting. Share your official comment with the agenda item number specified in the comments section of the Facebook or YouTube live videos. Now, our next item is the minutes, and I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the June 8th, 2020 minutes that were previously distributed.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Jeff?
Yes.
All right, please respond as I call your name. Kelly Baker Heffley,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Jeff Carson,
Aye.
Mike Hathaway,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Ken Scalf,
Aye.
and Jim Rock. I'm going to abstain since I wasn't here. The non-vote that now we'll have a vote to or a non-agenda items. The non-agenda process by design is reserved for emergency issues. Non-agenda items shall be considered only upon the unanimous approval of all historic zoning members. Any non-agenda items today, emergency items? Hearing none, then we're ready for citizen comments. These are open for Franklin citizens to be heard on items not included on this agenda. As provided by law, the Historic Zoning Commission makes no decision or consideration of action on citizen comments except to refer the matter to the planning director for administrative consideration or to schedule the matter for historic zoning consideration at a later date. Are there any citizen comments for items not on the agenda?
There are no citizen comments, no public on the line.
Thank you. All right, then we're ready for our first item tonight. Consideration of fencing at 203 2nd Avenue South, Diane Christian applicant. This is project 7291. Amanda?
Thank you. I'm presenting item 1.
Ms. Gibson will be sharing this, presenting this item, and then I will share screen when she requests it.
Oh, thank you. The applicants are requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of primary yard fencing at 203 2nd Avenue South. Amanda, if you could share your screen. I could also share mine if that works. Oh,
I have it pulled up. I can do that. It's
okay.
fine.
Thank you.
Sometimes I forget that you can do the same things.
Perfect, thank you.
From Zoom. Zoom is pretty incredible.
The 8 feet of fencing will be an extension of existing side yard fencing into the primary yard and perpendicular to the sidewalk located in front of the property. Amanda, if you could scroll down a little bit. So here you can see the fence style, size, and color, and the location of the proposed fencing extension. The proposed style and materials will be 3 feet cedar plank picket fencing, which is consistent with the existing fencing on the property. The guidelines state that wooden picket fences are the most common fencing material for the primary yard, and that primary yard fencing should not exceed 3 feet in height. Staff has consulted with Building and Neighborhood Services, and the proposed fencing, as shown, does not encroach into the right-of-way. The material, style, and location of the fencing is consistent with the guidelines. It's recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve the proposed fencing, provided that the application meets all of the requirements of Building and Neighborhood Services, and that any changes be returned to the Historic Zoning Commission for review and approval. Thank you.
We're ready for the applicant to comment. I saw Diane and Mike. Christian, I don't know which one of you is going to comment. Diane, you're muted. You're muted.
I'll let Mike speak.
Okay.
Mike, you're muted.
Now I should be unmuted.
Yes, you are. That's good. You want to comment on the application, Mike?
Well, it's kind of as proposed. It's a short fence. There was landscape bushes there originally that died. We've only owned the property 5 months and we're restoring it. And this is kind of an extension of trying to make it aesthetic and all the changes that we've already submitted. But the picket fence would go from the edge of the existing hedge to the sidewalk, which is approximately 8 feet.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, are there any citizens that wish to comment on this application? Hearing
Are there
none.
any citizens on the line? No public comment
Okay.
and no emails either.
All right, thank you. Then we're ready for the commission deliberation. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the project fencing, project 7291.
Thank you, Mr. Lester. Is there a
Second. That's Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, any discussion?
Will there be a post like the one in the picture, a heavier post when it
Yes,
terminates?
it'll be a 6x6, 2 of them, one on each end with a post cap on top.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ready to vote? Okay, please respond then as I call your name. Kelly Baker Heffley,
Aye.
Susan Besser, okay, Jeff Carson,
Aye.
Mike Hathaway,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Ken Scalf,
Aye.
Jim Roberts, aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is for consideration of alterations on porch at 1028 Benelli Park Court. Jim Poole applicant is project 7289.
Thank you. The applicants are requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the alteration of an existing porch at 1028 Benelli Park Court. If I may share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. The project consists of adding 7 decorative brackets to the existing front porch columns. The brackets will be composed of the same material as the porch columns. So here is the house currently, and then the proposed added brackets are depicted here. The guidelines state that architectural features that are not original to historic properties, to historic porches, should not be added, and that buildings should not be historicized by adding inappropriate architectural ornamentation. The intent of these standards is to preserve and maintain historic architectural features and avoid the imitation of a different period of significance. As the subject property is an infill house built in 2015 and a non-contributing building to the Boyd Mill Avenue Historic District, proposed alteration would not be inappropriate and would not be seen as an attempt to historicize the house. The proposed alteration is not a replication of a design seen on a neighboring property, and the alteration would not have a negative impact on the character of the street or district. The guidelines also state that porch elements should be composed of wood, brick, or metal. The proposed alterations conform to the guidelines. It's recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve the proposed porch alteration, provided that the application meet all of the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department, and any changes be returned to the Historic Zoning Commission for review and approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Would the applicant like to make any comments on this application?
Yeah, hey, this is Jim Poole. Thank you for your consideration. And we just wanted to, they're really just purely decorative. We just thought the porch needed a little something. We've been here about a year, and my brother's an architect, so I had him take a look, and he came up with this drawing, and we really liked it, and appreciate you guys considering it.
Okay. Are there any citizens that wish to comment on this application?
No public comments and no emails.
Thank you. Thank you. It's time then the commission to deliberate. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. This is Lisa Marquardt.
Okay.
I move to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed porch alteration on project number 7289.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it. It's good.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, discussion, questions? We ready to vote? Assuming so. Now, please respond then as I call your name. Kelly Baker Heffley.
Aye.
Susan Besser.
Aye.
Jeff Carson.
Aye.
Mike Hathaway. Aye. Brian Laster.
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt.
Aye.
Mary Pierce.
Aye.
Ken Scalf.
Aye.
And Jim Roberts. Aye. Thank you, Mr. Poole.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
All right, we're ready for our next item, which is consideration of new construction at 440 Boyd Mill Avenue. Preston Shea, applicant, project 7290.
Yes, the applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a 1 1/2 story principal structure with an attached side-loaded garage at 440 Boyd Mill Avenue. The applicant appeared before the Design Review Committee to discuss the proposal at its April 20th and its May 18th DRC meetings. The Boyd Mill Avenue Historic District consists of a variety of homes, we all know, a collection of 1 and 2 story colonial revival, bulk Victorian, bungalow style residences that were constructed in the early and mid 20th century. There are also a couple of mid-century ranch style homes, as well as the number of infill homes on the northern side of the street. The rhythm of the street has a reinforced setback for the historic residences, especially on the northern side. Driveways are generally in the side yards. The guidelines do recommend that new construction be designed to be compatible in the massing, the height, the size, the scale, and the architectural features with the historic adjacent buildings, and that new construction be complementary rather than detracting from the character of the historic district. Driveways should follow historic patterns and be located along the rear and side elevations and should be landscaped to mitigate impacts to the district's historic character. And further, the guidelines state that landscaping should not conceal or obscure any primary elevation. I've kind of divided the discussion up into topical headings. As far as size and setback, the subject property is located along the northern side of the street and features the typical frontage width. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, Kelly. While she pulls that up for me, the typical frontage width on the northern side of the street is evident here. Can everyone see my screen? Can you shake your head for me? Okay, great. So the property is located where this yellow pin is. So you can see the typical frontage width, but as you get back here, this is all the same property as well. So it has a much wider rear yard width than it does the frontage width, which is atypical for the street, certainly. The applicant is proposing to site the residence near the rear of the property back here, about 283 feet from the street, as noted by the applicant. Most of the front setbacks along the northern side of the street within the historic district area ranged from about 60 feet to 80 feet. As you can see in Exhibit 2, which shows an example of a typical front yard setback home, which I believe is located at 428 Boyd Mill Avenue, just this home here. So the a couple of deeper lots at 418 right here, and at 512, certainly here, exist along the street as well. And those lots are approximately 130 to 140 feet deep for front yard setbacks. 444 Boyd Mill Avenue, which is the property to the immediate left of the subject property here, is features approximately 110 front yard setback from the measurements taken from the City of Franklin interactive zoning map tools. Again, all approximate. The guidelines recommend that one reinforce and maintain those existing setbacks of adjacent structures. At 287 feet from the street, the proposal is approximately twice the depth of the street from the street than the other residences within the historic district block face. The proposed placement interrupts the rhythm of the street, the placement along the street, and thus detracts from the historic character. The size of the structure at a 6,741 square foot footprint is also larger than the adjacent building structure sizes. The guidelines would recommend that the structure, or new construction rather, be designed to be compatible in size with adjacent buildings. Due to the proposed siding of the building on the property back here, the applicant is proposing to have the driveway, and I'm going to stop sharing this screen and pull up the site plan here. Everyone see the site plan?
Yes.
Okay. Due to the placement of the building on the site, the applicant's proposing to have the driveway access on the right, and have the driveway attached to a attached garage here. So due to that siding on the property, the applicant is proposing to construct the driveway to go across the front of the residence. And the guidelines recommend that the driveway should follow the historic patterns and should be located on the rear or the side elevation to follow that historic pattern as seen throughout Boyd Mill Avenue Historic District. And as such, that proposal is not consistent with the recommendations of the guidelines. And speaking to the other guidelines, go to the elevations. The proposed scale at 1 1/2 stories is consistent for the Boyd Mill Avenue Historic District. The massing, however, of the proposal is not consistent with the recommendation of the guidelines because it's not consistent with the context of the district. The residence is proposed to have 4 different masses, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is designed well. The principal form here, the 2 wing forms, as I would call them, and you have a connector with the attached garage form. So it's proportioned well, but the mass is inconsistent with what you would see on the street. The overall width of the building at 140 feet is much more so than what's found elsewhere on the streetscape. The width of the residences on the south side of Boyd Mill Avenue within the designated historic district range from approximately 30 feet to 60 feet, with that narrower massing on the east side of the street. And then on the northern side, where this property is located, the widths of the residences range from approximately 40 feet to 70 feet, again with those narrower masses on the eastern side as well. So one could accept that there'd be greater massing on the western side of the street, but this is much more so than what is seen elsewhere on the street. One notable exception, of course, would be Magnolia Hall, the estate property at 600 Boyd Mill Avenue, which is on the a block face over, and it's measuring approximately 120 feet in width and is shown in Exhibit 4. It is on its own block face. The proposed structure cannot be sited to meet the recommendations for the reinforcement and maintenance of those existing setbacks because of the mass that is proposed here, meaning that the building is proposed to be massed in such a way that it wouldn't actually fit on the typical frontage width that is on the street at the front. A portion of the massing incompatibility is due to the proposal of the attached garage as seen here. Here's the connector and here's the garage itself. This portion from the connector over is approximately 38 feet in width. The guidelines would recommend that in areas where historic garages are generally detached, new garages should appear to be detached. Attached garages should be designed in such a way that they are located at traditional locations behind the rear plane of the main form of the house or otherwise not visible from the street. The applicant had provided some visual aids that demonstrate that the garage is visible from vantages from the street view. As noted by the guidelines, the landscaping should not conceal or obscure the primary elevation, so the use of trees to help limit the visibility of an attached garage, which is not recommended by the guidelines at this location, as discussed by the May Design Review Committee, is not recommended either. While the relocation of an attached garage would not mitigate the massing compatibility in its entirety, it would be most appropriate to detach the proposed garage and relocate it behind the main plane of the residence. An alternative placement of an attached garage further behind and to the rear of the principal structure would also meet the intent of the guideline so as not to be visible from street views. The proposed height here at 29 feet to the primary ridge that you see on the main form of the house that I'm showing here with my cursor appears to be mostly consistent with the guidelines. Heights range on the northern side of the street from approximately 15 feet for the ranchers to approximately 32 feet in height. As for materials and architectural features, the materials of the proposed new construction are listed as cementitious lap siding with a 7-inch reveal, board and batten siding for the garage portion of the structure, standing seam metal roofing for the garage portion, stone wainscoting, architectural grade asphalt shingles, and rubber membrane roofing on the rear porch area is not visible from the street. Stone and window specifications have not been provided. Lap siding should be consistent with that on the principal structure and adjacent with historic buildings. The use of a 7-inch lap reveal is mostly consistent with the guidelines. It's not the most typical historically for what you see in Franklin, but there are examples of colonial revival styles on the street that feature wider lap reveals. There aren't as many in Franklin. There are a couple there, and I do have those featured as examples in exhibits 2 and 5 in your staff recommendations. The secondary proposed siding material, which is a board and batten siding, is not typical for the historic homes in the neighborhood, but it has been approved for infill construction on the street, most notably on the northern side of the street on the eastern end. The proportion and rhythm of the window openings are consistent with the guidelines. And with all of that, it is recommended that the commission deny the proposed new construction, as the guidelines recommend that one, reinforce and maintain existing setbacks of adjacent structures, and due to the depth of the proposal from the street at 287 feet from the street, the proposal is approximately twice the depth from the street than other residences within the historic district along that block face. Therefore, the placement interrupts the rhythm of placement along the street and thus detracts from the historic character. The size of the proposed structure is much larger than those of adjacent building sizes, and the guidelines recommend that the new construction be designed to be compatible in size with adjacent structures. The massing of the proposal is not consistent with the context of the district, and the proposed structure cannot be sided to meet the recommendation of the guidelines for the reinforcement and maintenance of existing setbacks of adjacent structures due to that incompatible massing. The proposed garage that is attached is visible from street vantages, which has been demonstrated by the applicant, and the guidelines recommend against that, stating that attached garages should stating actually that in areas where historic garages are generally detached, new garages should appear detached. And that attached garages should be designed to be placed in traditional locations behind the rear plane of the main form of the house or otherwise not visible from the street. And due to the proposed siding of the building on the property with the access on the right and the garage on the left, the driveway cuts across the front of the residence, which does not follow historic patterns that you see in the town and within the Boyd Law Avenue Historic District for the placement of driveways, which is against the recommendations of the guidelines. However, if issued a COA, it is recommended that the applicant provide a sample of the proposed stone to staff or the commission for consideration and approval in light of the guidelines, as well as the window specifications, which must either consist of wood or a composite material that is emulative of wood. Thank you.
Would the applicant please make comments on the application?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Yes, sir. So we've been to the design review committee a couple times now, and unfortunately, we've never had an opportunity to meet on site. But I think with everyone's understanding of the property, the property itself is atypical, I think you would say. We've intentionally moved the house or placed the house where it is to take advantage of the lot. One of, I think, the biggest excuse me. I guess in general, in theory, I don't disagree with a lot of the recommendations that staff made, but I feel we've all come to terms with the fact that Boyd Mill is extremely varied. This lot is atypically large, and a lot of factors went into the placement, the garage position, and some of the things that staff had mentioned. Specifically, point number one, the house, being twice as deep as other houses. Well, the property is way larger than most of the properties on Boyd Mill. Amanda, if you could pull up the contextual aerial that I submitted. There we are. So on the southeast corner of Boyd Mill, a couple cottages. I'm not sure what the distance is. A little further up to your right, 15 feet or so off the street. And I apologize to the commission. I'm rehashing things that we've discussed a couple times already. But upon seeing the recommendations on paper, I feel like I need to explain our position again. So we've got a couple cottages in the southeast corner, 15, 20 feet off the road. I'm not sure what that number is. Then moving westward, we've got the Franklin Manor apartment complex. Left of that are 3 pretty new construction houses done by yours truly. I hope you like them. Past that, we've got a mid-century ranch house. Past that, there are 4 or 5 cottages, varying ages, varying materials, some newer than others. And then you come to our lot, the subject property. I mean, if you can maybe scroll down one to the collection of photos, there we are. So in the upper center and lower center, are our lots. The lower center is actually the view of the proposed lot from the street. It's very heavily landscaped. It's very green. It's behind a stone wall. And I had to sneak onto the property to get the image above, which is the perspective view. One of the staff's comments, number 4, I think there may be a little confusion. It says that the detached garage is demonstrated, or is visible, as demonstrated by the applicant. There is, so where Amanda's hand just was, there's an image that says existing garage, and that I just want to make sure that was understood, that that's the home or the garage belonging to 444 Boyd Mill, that even upon stepping onto the lot is obscured by the landscaping. And then in perspective behind would be our proposed design. So it's behind the existing lot. It's lower. You can't write exactly where Amanda's hand is. You can catch a corner of it up at the eave line. So to say the garage is visible, is questionable. There's at the first historic zoning meeting, we did a handful of things. We rotated the garage to the side. We played up the infill component. That's the glazed in section and the metal roof component. We lowered the overall height of the house. We shifted the house away from the common property line with 436 Boyd Mill. To touch on the driveway, our proposal is to take out a minimal section of the stone wall, as few trees as possible, in order to honestly preserve the streetscape that's there. Again, there are clusters of pattern on Boyd Mill, but Boyd Mill itself, as illustrated and I discussed with the contextual aerial, Boyd Mill itself is terribly varied. The houses immediately adjacent, 444 Boyd Mill, upper left, and then 436 lower right, themselves are widely varied, and that's a small sample. What we have right now, the streetscape that is Boyd Mill is green. It's a stone wall. It's trees. It's open space, and I would argue, and I hope the commission would agree that by pushing the house back, we are preserving what's there. To pull this house up, directly in line, not that it could because there's some variation there, but to pull this house up, roughly between 444 and 436 would be, it would crowd both homes. It would overshadow the house at 436, which is kind of on the downhill, and that is not at all what the Kelsos, the homeowners, not at all what they wanted to do. They wanted to be respectful of the community, respectful of, and to preserve the green space that's already there, the pause between the 444 and then the row of cottages on the right. So placement of the home was intended to be respectful of the existing streetscape and to preserve what's been there for now, at least, I don't know, whenever 436 was built, 50, 60 years or so. That said, as a result of last month's meeting, we pushed the garage back even further. It was asked that we show the adjacent homes, which this illustration does, at least the immediate adjacent. The next image down, the black and white illustration, shows height, but the perspective there is greatly misleading. So this one doesn't show, I think, near the relationship the image above in the photos with the perspective view does. The perspective view was going to be much truer to the streetscape. Staff mentioned the width of the house. Yes, it is wider than the typical home, but again, the lot itself is much larger than most of the lots on Boyd Mill. If we could go back to the contextual aerial, the subject property, it's hard to see from there, but it extends back to the side of the fourth house on Glass Lane. It is deeper than the Vandalia cottages. There's an entire neighborhood of condominiums that are closer to Boyd Mill than our property is, just to give some idea of the scale of this lot. And thus, the Kelsos, my clients, in trying to be respectful of the community, trying not to cram as much house as humanly possible in between the two existing houses, trying to take advantage of their property, trying to be sensitive to the topography, which led to the garage being on the left or the high side. We came with this as our offering, and I think, at least as of the last design review meeting, I think folks were fairly understanding of this just being a tremendously varied neighborhood, a tremendously varied collection of style. Again, starting with the little cottages on the right, apartment complexes, new construction, infill, historic houses on multiple acres. Across the hill, we've got more apartments. So I guess in closing for me, we've done the things that I think Historic has requested in the design review meetings, and we are very much trying to be good stewards of Boyd Mill Avenue. I think it's either a single family home or redevelopment with multiple houses, and my clients aren't interested in that.
Anything else, Preston?
I believe that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any citizens that wish to comment on this application?
There are no citizen comments and no email comments.
Thank you. Then we're ready for the commission to deliberate. I'd like to start with a motion from somebody.
I'll kick this off for conversation purposes. So I'll make a motion to approve. I don't have let's see, project number 7290.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
She will have to make a reason why she's going against the guidelines.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So this might be a little long-winded. With each process, we have to kind of balance the private property rights versus the public benefit. And with the variations that exist in this overlay, and also with the setbacks, also being varied, it's just really difficult for me to understand how a person can enjoy their full property rights on this particular piece of property because it's awkward size in the deep lot. So it makes me kind of question whether or not we're receiving enough public benefit to create that imbalance with the private enjoyment.
Who had a comment?
I would like to comment as well on my second.
Thank you.
So when I look at the Vandalia development and the Franklin cottage apartments, I mean, obviously our board green-lighted the Vandalia cottages. And when I see the subject property, it's so far off the road, I do agree with the architect that they're not cramming a house in between two existing houses. And so that's why I seconded.
Okay, discussion. We have a motion to approve, which is against the staff recommendation.
I have a comment, Chair.
All right, Susan, Ms. Besser.
This house is coming across as a house that would be in a modern day development. And in my estimation, it's just not sensitive to the context of the neighborhood, and the massing is not sympathetic to the context.
Okay, other discussion.
This is Mary Pierce, and I feel like that I appreciate that they're going to do a remarkable house on a beautiful piece of unique property, but I don't feel like that this is the best solution to it fitting in with the neighborhood. And there have been changes in the Envision Franklin plan that call for some compatibility of size and larger lot size. So Vandalia cottages right now could not be approved under the new plan. And I also think that having the house sitting at an angle is not a good thing either, and that there is a way to make something better work. So I will not be supporting the application as presented.
May I comment? I don't know if it's helpful, but I do want to say that Vandalia Cottages was a planned unit development that was approved for density purposes by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So that wasn't a by right approval for density. The by right approval would be if there was, for example, a lot size proposed for subdivision that was met without having to request a rezoning in order to achieve it. There is a development on the street called Benelli Park that was able to achieve that. Those lot sizes are approximately 4,000 square feet. If I recall correctly, the minimum lot size at the time of the development was 4,000 square feet, and I think that's what they are. I think what Mary is referring to is that the minimum lot size in the zoning ordinance now is 6,500 square feet. So that would be a change. But Vandalia Cottages is not one that could be approved without having a rezoning and requiring all Board of Mayor and Alderman approval. I hope that helps clarify that question or any confusion involving that.
Jim, can I ask a clarifying question of staff?
Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Just clarification purposes from the massing question. Is it an issue of its context within the street, or is it based on the percentage that we try to stay within based on the lot size? And do we know what that percentage of the square footage versus the lot size is?
Well, I think that's a great question. If you're talking about, maximum building coverage, certainly the lot size for this particular property does not have that issue because it is a far larger lot size than is normally on the street. The mass is more, it's not all about width. I know that it, my discussion in the analysis centered along width. It's about width and bulk and proportions, and the building's proportioned well. The proposal is proportioned very well. The architect does a great job with that. And I don't mean to discredit that in any way. It's just that it is a lot wider than what you see on the street. But to the point that it wouldn't be able to fit on the typical lot width that you see on the street. And if it were to be moved forward as proposed, then it wouldn't fit. So it actually has to sit at the rear of the property in order to make it work. If it were redesigned to be half the size, it could probably work. But there's no way for me to address that discussion without divorcing another important guideline that I have to focus on as well. The four main tenets of the guidelines as far as infill construction would be height, massing, scale, and setbacks. And setbacks is one of those that is first and foremost. So it's hard for me to talk about adjusting the mass without addressing the setback. But one thing I do discuss in the analysis is that, removing that connector piece with the garage would help address that to some degree. And I do want to apologize to Mr. Shea. When I was talking about the visibility of the garage, I think I was kind of confusing that with that proportion, that this kind of a four-piece proportioned building where you have a wing, main portion of the house, another wing, and then the connector with the garage. And I think you see a lot of that connector that I kind of, think of with the garage from the street view. So if you were to remove that connector and garage and put it further behind the house or completely detach it and put it behind the house, then it would definitely address the mass in a meaningful way. So I hope that helps answer your question.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question. This is Lisa Marquardt.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the driveway. I haven't seen one of these in a very long time, if ever. Such a long driveway, and so I guess this would be a question for staff. Is that something that would come in front of building and neighborhood services or zoning, or how would that be approved, and what would be our purview over that?
Well, the Historic Zoning Commission does approve how new driveways look, or if new or existing driveways are reconfigured in any way. In this case, it does require a new curb cut, and so we would ask that as part of the permitting process that the applicant work through the new curb cut to ensure that it's properly placed. And I think where they're proposing it will probably work because this is a local street and it's not going to have a lot of issue as far as clear zones or siding issues or being too close to a major intersection, what have you. But we would primarily be concerned with the material, and I think that's a very excellent question. So, Ms. Marquardt, I think that we would need to clarify what that material would be, and because it is such a long driveway, I think that it's a very important question to ask in terms of compatibility with the district. I think Mr. Shea would be happy to comment on what that is. I failed to address that in the staff report.
Yeah, I guess just to clarify, the reason I was bringing it up is not so much about the material. Obviously that would be something we would have to consider if the motion were to pass. But I just don't see anywhere anything that even resembles such a unusual driveway. And I know that the architect is stuck between a rock and a hard place because you need to get back there, obviously, in order to make use of this beautiful property. So I understand why it has to be like that. Again, it's just the difficulty that I see is the fact that it's so unusual as I look at all the other properties here. That's my only comment, and that I would echo what Ms. Besser said as well. Thank you.
Preston, you want to comment on the materials for the driveway? You're muted.
Okay, you got me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, I think it's our intention to do that in either a grass or a gravel or an asphalt, which is seen elsewhere. And I know this isn't Magnolia Hall, but the driveways from Magnolia Hall, lead in several different directions are pretty long, and I do think Lisa nailed it. I think she hit the nail on the head. All of the elements of the design guidelines that are sort of counting against us aren't considering the lot that does exist, that the clients want to build on. Everything sort of working against us is actually working against the lot, and I hope goes to illustrate the the fact that this is just an atypical lot.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chair.
All right, Kelly, go ahead.
So the way that I read this, and I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly, that there's really not another way to access the property except through Boyd Mill, and that the bulk of the property does sit behind that entrance space because it's been subdivided. Is that correct? That it's really the only way to access it through Boyd Mill?
That's the way I understand it. Is that, Preston, that's correct, is it not?
Yes, sir.
And because the access point is on Boyd Mill, it falls underneath our purview. If they were to access it from 96, if that was available, it wouldn't go through zoning. Is that also correct? I guess it's because it's been subdivided. I don't really know.
My understanding is the only access is from Boyd Mill. Their access is off Boyd Mill, and
The address is at Boyd.
yeah, there's no alternative access. You're right.
Okay, so that that just really factors into my understanding about the potential use of this lot and why I'm comfortable with the variation from the guidelines. But I do agree with my fellow commissioners that, if we could detach the garage and put it in the back, that would be ideal and I think would solve a lot of problems. But because of all those variations that we've talked about, I'm still pretty comfortable with this one.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, may I ask another question?
Yes.
So while we're on the subject of the drive, one thing I noticed in the street view, it looks like there is an historic rock wall in front of this property. Would the drive need to breach that wall, or is there an opening already at that location?
Preston could clarify this, but it looks to me like it's on, if you look at the second picture that he presented in the top row, on that page, it looks like that driveway will come in on the right side, that it will avoid that rock wall. Is that right, Preston, or do you have to go through the rock wall?
Actually, no, we would need to breach that wall, and we'd like to take out as little of that as physically possible, but we would need to penetrate that.
So in your pictures on the top, the top that I'm looking at, it says perspective view. The rock wall is in front of that.
The rock wall and the perspective view is actually behind us. I needed to get on the property.
Right.
Behind.
Yes. Okay. So the rock wall is there, right behind
Yes, sir.
that picture.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure how much of that wall is historic. I do know that the immediate property to the left did build a good portion of that wall when they did some improvements to their property several years ago.
Ms. Rose, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mary.
one thing I would say is rock walls are forgiving on that kind of thing and can be rebuilt. But I would like the architect to speak to why the house is sitting on an angle.
Hey, Mary, I'm glad you asked that. And that may just be an optical illusion because there's the house, then it steps back, and the drive steps back a little bit more. That is exactly parallel to Boyd Mill Avenue, the house is. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Any other questions?
Here, I have questions. This is directed more towards staff. So this obviously was a former part of 444 Boyd Mill and was subdivided. Is this a common situation that we may see again, or is this very unique?
This is a lot of record for, this has been a lot of record for a long time. I'm not sure how long this has been on record, and I don't know if Kelly has information to share to that effect, but I'm not sure that you would see this very commonly in the historic districts. But we do have within the zoning ordinance requirements for what's called a minimum lot width. So what you're seeing here is at the lot width that is comparable to what you see for the lot widths on the street. So technically, the this could have been created recently and met the requirements, with a very small exception that there is some slight floodplain at the very corner back here. That's how I know it's been on record for a very long time, because we right after 2010 there wasn't the ability to create new residential single family lots.
Amanda, if I'm going to jump in really
Yes,
quickly.
please.
Because I think that the map doesn't show the floodplain quite correctly in that back corner.
Okay, thank you.
And that it was created within the past few years by the property owner that's adjacent, because it belonged to the White House next door to the west.
Okay, I apologize, because I thought there was floodplain back here. Okay, so it was created in the last few years, but I am correct in saying that there is a minimum lot frontage requirements, and what you are seeing here is meeting that. What you won't see are folks creating lots that have frontages that aren't at least meeting the average width of what you're seeing on the block face. So they were able to create that. And I'm not sure that you're going to see that a lot in the historic districts, because there's not a lot of opportunity to do stuff like this in the historic districts, from what I can recall. Kelly, can you think of any situations?
It's not very common, no, but it may happen again. It's something that we can take a look at, because it certainly wasn't intended for the bulk of the lot to be behind another lot.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
All right, sir.
this is Jim. I've got a question for Mr. Shea. It sounds like the bulk of the objections are to the massing and primarily the garage, but could Mr. Shea address any options or willingness to modify the plan to address the staff concerns specifically on the garage and moving it as a separate structure or behind the main structure?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. We're again sort of fighting this idea of total mass and mass of the house. We had the garage further forward on previous submittals. We've since shifted it back, probably a good 20 feet. If we detached the garage, then the overall measurable width gets even wider. Yes, it's a detached garage, but as drawn, we tried to put a lot of glass between the house and the garage. We changed roof materials to metal. We changed the character of the garage itself. So, could it be detached and pushed further to the side? Yes, but then we're making the overall composition even wider, which I don't know that anybody wants. So, in lieu of expanding the total composition, we did keep it connected, but we've added a glass and metal connector just to sort of at least divorce that from a run-on from the main house.
What are staff's thoughts? Thank you, Mr. Shea. What are staff's thoughts on that situation? If you would increase the mass?
Well, I think I appreciate that question, Mr. Carson. As staff, I appreciate the commission's role in determining when there is a situation that is unique and determines or warrants additional consideration. Or guidelines, they're not regulatory, and I can certainly appreciate that. My role is to help create the guidelines and to help provide guidance to you on how to apply those. and in the interest of parity for the neighborhood and the overall historic districts. So in this community, we often receive requests for attached garages, and I do regularly recommend that they be detached or otherwise have the appearance of being detached. In this case, I'm not, even though I respect what the applicants provided in terms of providing, the glass and, changing materials, I don't feel strongly that it has the appearance of being detached in other, in ways that other applications have, like what I would call a semi-detached. So in this case, in trying to provide, a sense of justification in light of the guidelines, or meeting, trying to meet the intent of the guidelines in the best way possible, and provide our citizens the ability, or explain to them how, the guideline was applied to this property. I do think that it would be best to try to either push the form of the garage further back, or to overall just detach it. I do understand Mr. Preston's, or Mr. Shea's discussion on the overall composition, but I do have a lot of conversations about, sizes of additions, sizes of garages, sizes of forms in general. And, it's just very difficult as staff to, support a mass of this size when it couldn't be supported by others for other projects. So it's, to Mr. Carson's point, I do think that, divorcing the garage from the forum altogether, or making a really solid attempt to push it way further back on the forum would be a much needed justification for the mass to meet the guidelines.
We had, if I'm still, this is Preston, if
Yeah,
I'm still
go ahead.
unmuted.
Go ahead.
We had discussed pushing the garage further back, but in light of the existing tree canopy, the topography, the further we go back, the further we start to disrupt and increase our construction activity and retaining. And so again, we're trying to be sensitive to that. I actually moved the entire house back per historic's request, and in order to sort of give a little more front yard or space at the driveway, and as a result, it's putting us further and further back on the lot, and the lot does fall off. So we've got a whole lot of unique circumstances. We're trying to be sensitive to the existing green space, the topography, trying not to just scorched earth on this downhill side, such that the Kelsos are fine going down half a flight of stairs to their outdoor recreation space. We're trying to minimize or completely eliminate retaining as much as we can, figure it out on paper at this point. So we're trying to be sensitive to the topography, the existing canopy. We've put the garage on the left-hand side of the house, which is behind and 6 feet below the existing house at 444. I just, given the scale of the lot and just how varied and how unique a situation this is, I hope you'd agree that we've put a good faith effort out there.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I just have to make another comment.
Go ahead.
And that is, if the scale and massing were closer to the street at the same average setbacks of the neighborhood, I couldn't support that.
Yeah.
But when I look at the actual lot frontage at 82 feet, I don't know what the minimum is for actually building on a lot, but that would make a long, skinny house. So it seems like that whoever has this property has to do something different toward the back of the property. And that's the only reason I'm supporting this.
Good comment. Okay, is there anything else? We're ready to vote then. Okay, this would be a vote to approve the application as presented. So if you would respond as I call your name. Kelly Baker Heffley.
Aye.
Susan Besser.
No.
Jeff Carson.
Aye.
Mike Hathaway. Aye. Brian Laster.
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt.
No.
Mary Pierce.
No.
Ken Scalf.
Aye.
Jim Roberts. No. Okay, that gets it 5-4. Application is approved as presented.
Thank you.
Is there any other business?
Thank you.
Amanda, is there any other business?
Yes, I did want to mention that we have Design Review Committee on Monday, July 20th at 4 o'clock. That'll be through Zoom. We will send you the link if we haven't already. I have 8 items. Well, actually, I think I have 9 items confirmed as of right now. There might be more waiting on me in my inbox. It's going to be a really big meeting, so I will try to get you materials just as soon as possible so you can start reviewing those quickly. I will work with the chair to start structuring the agenda so we'll have time elements or just like time period set up for each one. So we'll try to honor those because I know it'll be a long meeting when we want to try to respect everyone's time.
Amanda, is it possible to unlock the vestibule on the backside of City Hall? Because right now you can't pick up a packet unless it's during business hours.
And yes, I do want to apologize for that. I wasn't aware that was going to happen. So I am so sorry that happened to you all this weekend. I addressed that with staff during our staff meeting today. And what I'll do is when that happens in the future, I'll make sure to work with facilities to ask that those doors not be locked for the weekend, that you'll pick those up. Or if that's not possible, I will set up an alternative pickup location for everybody. So I will be in communication with you all as we work toward resolving that issue. I am so sorry that happened.
All right, if there's nothing else, then I'll enter.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Wait a minute. Start again. Who was that that made the motion?
That's Jeff.
Jeff.
Or I'm sorry, Ken.
Ken. And I heard Kelly. I got it. Didn't respond. Your name. Kelly Baker Heffley.
Aye.
Susan Besser.
Aye.
Jeff Carson.
Aye.
Mike Hathaway. Aye. Brian Latt.
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt.
Aye.
Mary Peters.
Aye.
Ken Scalf.
Aye.
Jim Roberts. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Aye.